Because if we get challenged around it, we don't know what to say. We don't know how to frame it. We don't know how to express it necessarily. And so we step aside, and the wilderness doesn't necessarily mean going out the bushes or the trees, but the wilderness can just simply be stepping inside of ourselves and taking it inward into the spiritual wilderness, in our own consciousness. I think that's more what it's about. So Elizabeth in you is your feminine feeling nature, knowing in our very soul that God keeps promises. God keeps promises. So when we are guided by Spirit, we know it's true. We believe it quickly because we're in our heart. Zechariah is the thought or idea and intellect that perceives the truth but doesn't yet understand it. And that's often where we are. And so you and I might know the birth of John is a high intellectual perception of truth, and the marriage of the idea with deep trust is an important part of our experience. The idea of Zechariah and Elizabeth being married brings that together into a high intellectual thought that we begin to bring into our life and puts Spirit into action. You know, we've seen people who have incredible passion and the ability to bring a divine idea into being. And when I was minister in Reno, we brought this fellow into our church. His name is Willard Fuller. And he may have been to Coeur d'Alene, I don't know. I think he was in Spokane. But he's the guy that turns fillings into gold. He does this alchemy thing. And he was a Southern Baptist minister. He's since passed away. He must have been 80 years old back in the mid-80s. At least he seemed that way when he came in. But he came, we brought him in, we talked to some other Unity churches. Oh yeah, bring him in, yeah, he's great. So he came in, and very interesting guy, and we did this evening event. We had a lot of people show up to it. It must have been, the sanctuary was pretty close to being full. And so he got up and he gave this passionate talk, just very uplifting, very energetic. And then he went around and he collected the offering by hand. And he said, I think it was $1,600 or something. We need this much to pay expenses and this much to do this. He kind of went through this thing. And so he walked around and he said, okay, somebody hands him $5, somebody hands. By the time he got to the back, people were handing him $100 bills. Everybody, the energy was just so high in the room just because he was almost like an auction thing. He was auctioning, he collected the money and he was counting it as he went, and the energy built up. And then he did this, and once the energy was at this certain level, he did this healing experience. And he said afterwards, he passed out the dental tools, the little mirrors that you stick in your mouth. And so we're all pairing up, to check each other's teeth, So we're looking at each other's teeth. Well, our licensed teacher, her name was Esther Early. And Esther was very conservative and really sweet lady, but very conservative. And so somebody was checking her teeth and said, Esther, you have a lot of gold in your mouth. She goes, no, I don't have any gold. She said, yes, do you have a lot of gold in your mouth? No. He says, so he looked in there, and sure enough, there was gold in there. She said, so she didn't know what to think, didn't know what to believe, didn't know what to do. So she scheduled an appointment for her dentist for the next day. And she went to her dentist. She'd been going to this dentist for 25 years. She goes in and says, I want you to just check my teeth out and see if you think there's anything different in there. So she goes in and gets in the chair, and he looks, and he says, who's been working on your teeth? Because it was like accusatory, right? Who's been working on your teeth? She goes, well, nobody. She says, well, you've got gold fillings. Where did you get those gold fillings? So she told him. He threw her out of the office. Said, don't come back here. I did not believe that. You've been going someplace else. You're trying to pull this over on me. Just, get out of here. So she came back to the church, and she was just so excited I mean, she was so empowered. And so she went from this kind of this intellectual sort of perception of truth, and boy, she was there. I mean, she got the spirit of the whole experience. She got the reality of that miracle.